Welcome to this webinar. It's a unique webinar because we're going to the West Bank and we are going to the Bethlehem area. We're joined by Ali Ahmed, not his real name. His name and identity is being hidden for his own safety, to talk a little bit about what's going on in the West Bank, especially as the word annexation is coming into the political lexicon of Israel. His identity is, if all of you are saying, hold on, I can only see his arm, that's okay. His identity, like I said, and name is being withheld because it's not always the safest thing in the West Bank, or some of you say Judea and Samaria, to be critical of the Palestinian leadership as a Palestinian. So first of all, Ali, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Neil, for granting me this opportunity to talk and share some things with you and with your audience.
So
Thank you so much. I appreciate this.
A pleasure. We put the question on my Facebook page. We said, if you were to speak to a Palestinian, what would you ask? And we got an overwhelming response. Lots of questions. I'm not going to be able to cover them all, but let's have a look at some of them. Rachel Korazin said, what's your story? Tell me, what would you like Israelis to know about yourself?
Yeah, it's a very good and a very long question. Actually, the answer would take me books to write it. But first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about myself, where I was born, and the place where I was born, and I grew up, which is a Palestinian refugee camp in the Bethlehem area. And just like what you started with, it's not. I'm not part of a culture or a system that really encourages me to speak critically or to be objective sometimes in my life. So as a result of this, I need to speak my mind by hiding my real identity and hiding my face, as you see. I'm 29 years old, and I was born, as I just said, I was born and raised in a refugee camp in the Bethlehem area, and I'm still living there. And growing up in this place shaped so many things in my mind, and in fact, it shapes the way that you perceive everything in this life. First of all, it shapes the way that you perceive the Israelis, perceive Israel, and second, it perceives the way that you perceive the West as well, because the word camp has so many negative connotations. What's in people's mind, that they think that this place is surrounded by a physical wall, and people, like, there is a sort of separation between the refugee camp and the other Palestinian cities. But in fact, what I wanted to emphasize here is that there's no physical wall around the camp, actually. Rather than there is an emotional wall. And this emotional wall that surrounds us in this place actually also influences and shape the way that we think and the way that we perceive life. So one of the major things that actually grow up with us is what I call it the victimhood mentality. Meaning, we grow up as a part of the education that we get here as thinking that we're the only victims in this world. And in fact, the first and probably most of the second generation, right after the Nakba, right after the 1948 crisis, right after the independence war, call it whatever you want, they grow up here thinking that they will never leave this place, they will never leave this refugee camp until they return to their own land, in the green, which is Israel now. This is in short about the place where I am and the place where I grew up. And to tell you a little bit about the place.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is, look, first of all, the word camp, you envisage barbed wire, people with guns, tents. What actually is it? I mean, we see a classroom there, we see many different things going on. What is it exactly?
Right. So I want you to imagine a sardine can where about several thousands of people are stuck in about 1.5 kilometers in this area. So you can imagine how crowded it is, how suffocating it is, where you fantasize the space actually. Your house doesn't have a space. Your school doesn't have a space. Even the camp itself doesn't have a space. If you want, if you as a kid, I remember my childhood, for instance, and it still is the same. For 29 years, it's the same. If you as a kid, you would like to play, you would like just like any kid in this world, you would like to play. You're looking for a playground or a green area or a place where you can play. And unfortunately, you don't find. So your only refuge in this place, in this refugee camp, is actually the street. And this suffocation actually, in fact, creates rage, creates hostility, creates hatred, creates anger inside of people's hearts and minds. Because you would ask yourself, why was I born here? Why I wasn't born in a normal place? Why I'm as a kid I don't enjoy my childhood the same way the rest of the children in this world enjoy it? Why other people have space and I don't? So this basically influences the way that you grow up. That you are actually filled with anger.
If we talk about you growing up,
yeah,
let's take a step back. When we talk about and Rob Muchnick asked this question. He said, "You say you're Palestinian, or what is a Palestinian?" And all I can say is, out of the questions that we got on the Jewish side, and some were Israeli, not everyone was living in Israel. There was questioning of even that the Palestinian people exist as a people. And I know in many ways it's interesting because it's an interesting voice, which you have many Palestinians say Israelis don't have a right here, and there seems to be a mutual, on both sides, people denying each other's right to exist. But to answer the question, as a Palestinian, how do you define yourself as a Palestinian? What is Palestinian nationalism?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is also a very good question because there are so many things that we're unfortunately stuck in, and I don't blame. Like, let me put it this way: that the relation between us is really shaped by ignorance. We really don't know anything about each other because we're just busy talking about each other and trashing each other, and this is what occupies our mind. So, if you're asking me what do you mean by Palestinian, this is I want to distinguish between my identity and your identity. Your identity is more connected to religion and nationalism at the same time. You identify yourself as a people of religion, and you identify yourself as a nation, as a people. Here, it's merely the fact that we are as a nation, we are part of the Arab nation. We are as a religion, we are part of the Muslim, and like we're Muslims and Christians. But regarding the nationhood, that patriotic life, that patriotic feeling, this is the Palestinian to me. It's my patriotic feeling. This is the word that connects me with so many Palestinians here in this land and on other places. When did
Palestinians start calling themselves Palestinian?
Yeah, this is also a good question. Now, if we want to go back to, if we set a point here that we can understand based on 1948. When did we start having a national movement? In fact, back to the Ottomans, and to the British Mandate. Let's start with the Ottomans. Palestine, in fact, was part of the Ottoman Empire. So, in fact, we were not. There was nothing called here. People are living in Palestine. In fact, people were living in this area, right? But they were not calling them Palestinians. So back then there was nothing called national movement, Palestinian national movement, that say we are Palestinians. No, we were Arabs who are part of the Ottoman Empire. Then after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, here we had the British Mandate. And also in the very beginning of the British Mandate, that national movement of that demand Palestinian or the state of Palestine or Palestinians, also it wasn't there in the very beginning of the British Mandate. It started later on when people realized that the Brits are colonizers. So this is our right now to demand our right of sovereignty and independence from the British Mandate. So basically, the idea of the Palestinian nationhood, the Palestinian national movement starting as a result of feeling that we are on this land, we are feeling oppressed by those colonizers, so we have the right to demand our state. Yeah, exactly. Which also happened at the same.
Where did
yeah, which happened.
Sorry, where did your parents originally come from?
Yeah. Now, also, this is a good question because, this is the idea of indigenous. Who is indigenous here?
I'm just asking where your grandparents are from. I'm not getting into indigenous, yes or no. I'm just saying where.
Yeah. Okay. So my great, let's say, my grandfather was born here. Was born in a village in near like it's between the Bethlehem area and Hebron. But my great, you can say the sixth or the seventh great grandfather came from a tribe from Saudi Arabia.
Interesting. What period was that? What year?
Sorry?
What year?
Sorry, can you repeat this again?
What year was that approximately?
This was approximately in the 16th or the 17th century, something like this, like in the year 800 something. 800 something.
Barak Berkovich wrote, "What were your thoughts about Jews when you grew up?"
Yeah, so basically as a part of this conflict, and particularly as a person who lives or who grew up and lived in this place, still lives in this place, you basically grow up seeing, of course, Israelis and Jews as the enemies. Those are the colonizers who came from the nowhere, particularly from Europe, to continue the British mandate and to continue the British colonization. So they basically, those people don't have any roots here. They faked this narrative of the land of Israel to claim. Yeah. Okay. Let me just continue this part a little bit. When you see our education, you have to know something very, very, very important here, which is the way that our education system lacks objectivity. There are so many things here that unfortunately that are part of our education. When I say education, I'm talking about the culture, I'm talking about the media, I'm talking about the curriculum. This lacks objectivity, and this influences the way that also we perceive things. When you grow up thinking that your own education system is the only right thing, this is a crisis. And as a part of this education system that doesn't encourage objectivity, you would blindly perceive and like passively perceive and absorb what you are being taught. You asked me what actually changed your mind. It's also a long story, but I would summarize it in few sentences, which is a meeting like this. A meeting between me and a settler in about I think 6 or 7 years ago. As part of this reality here, the only thing that we see here is the Israeli soldier. So this also affects the way that we grow up. When you grow up 29 years old and you barely see an Israeli, and the only Israeli that you see is that guy who's wearing that green military suit holding the gun, and so you would believe that this is Israel and those are the Israeli. They're just soldiers, and their mission in this world is just to scare me and make my life terrible.
So if I can interrupt 1 second, we received an interesting question which adds to what you're saying. Scott Jacobs asked, he says, how much does Islam and bigotry within Islam act as a factor of Arabs hating Jews and Palestinians hating Jews? How much is it a national conflict? How much is it a religious conflict?
Yeah. Of course, definitely this conflict has so many layers. Part of it is religious, economic, social, political, national, of course. So, do you hear me, Neil?
Yeah, I can hear you. I absolutely hear you, yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, as I was just, we have so many layers of this conflict, and each one contributes. Let's talk about the religious a little bit. For me, if you're asking me about my religious identity, I'm culturally Muslim, and let's say 99 of the population of the refugee camp, they're Muslims. So basically, you grew up in a Muslim culture, and I call myself myself culturally Muslim because I left practicing the religion for so many reasons, and part of it was the amount of incitement that I saw, the amount of hatred that some people spread, utilizing or exploiting the religion to this message. Um, uh, but let's be specific and talk about how the religion, how Islam affects this conflict, and in a way share what happened in the Palestinian mind and how Palestinians see this. Regarding the main thing that comes to my mind, that comes to everybody's minds when you talk about Islam and the conflict, is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is the place where it was the direction to the Muslim prayers, or the second place, let's say. Sorry. Yeah, it was the first place where the Muslims 14 centuries ago used to the direction of their prayers. So it got its significance as the first place, right before they changed it to Al-Kaaba. So the Muslims are still stuck in that position and believing that this was a holy place because at some point it was the direction of our prayers. And it also gets its significance because you have that story, that miraculous story of how Prophet Muhammad went to the heavens and he jumped from Al-Aqsa, from the Dome of the Rock. So it gets its significance from this. Now, how does this affect?
Sorry to interject for 1 second, though. Within Islam, how does that affect the politics today? So, for example, we have Hamas, which seems to be much more religiously affiliated. Fatah uses Islam often as a counter Hamas. How much would you say in Bethlehem, for example, the Bethlehem area, is Islamic fundamentalism increasing and Hamas becoming successful? One of the arguments we're hearing is that annexation would lead to the fall of the Palestinian Authority and could well open the door to a Hamas takeover in the West Bank. So practically, how much is the religious issue and significance a real threat?
Yeah. Nowadays, I believe that there is a dramatic change in it. I don't believe that Islam has really that much influence on the way that the Palestinians see things and react to things. We cannot deny that, of course, it plays a major role. And if you remember what happened at Al-Aqsa, at the Al-Aqsa Mosque a few years ago, when they put the magnetometers, it was the reaction was limited to Jerusalem, to the Jerusalemites only, and barely you saw anything that happened here. And even though it was a kind of Israeli provocation, let's say, so many perceived as an Israeli provocation, and the reaction was only limited to Jerusalem. You would barely see anything here. Now, if you're asking,
when you say here, you're talking Bethlehem.
Yeah.
More and more I talk to Palestinians, the more it seems to be that there's a two-state solution going on. And when I say two-state, I'm talking about maybe a Palestinian state in the West Bank, but Gaza's a totally different story. So I'm curious, like as a Palestinian living in the West Bank, who's culturally Islamic, how does your society see Hamas?
Yeah, look.
Are they like buried in?
2005.
Or how do you see them?
No. I don't want you to think so much about Islam when you think about Bethlehem. First of all, people here are very like they're not the hardcore religious people. No. Let me just give you an example. In the place where I live in, several thousand, and we have barely two simple mosques that are barely, the capacity of these mosques are barely a few hundreds. So basically, religion is not the only thing that really let's say generates the emotion or really control things. Religion is something important, yes, but it's not the main thing. The main thing is merely political. You ask me how people perceive Hamas. After the experience of 2005, when Hamas won and took over the government, people realized that, I'm sorry for the word, Fatah and Hamas are actually the same shit. And before that, because we're unfortunately since Oslo until Yasser Arafat died, we were ruled by Fatah, and people saw the corruption of Fatah. People saw how those people cannot move us forward to any place, cannot take us to any future, to any flourishing future.
Why do you
so
say
they decided?
Corrupt? Why are they corrupt? You're saying Fatah, the Palestinian Authority was corrupt. Where? Why?
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to Oslo a little bit. When finally the Palestinians and the Israel decided to shake hands and to start with a peace process, the entire or the whole world was celebrating. I call it like a sort of political orgasm. They were so happy to the point that finally they saw, okay, Yasser Arafat is shaking hands with Rabin, and finally those people are going to recognize each other and they're going to move forward in peace talks. And this is what ends with the two-state solution. And the international community and the West, particularly the West, they supported the Palestinian Authority without thinking to what extent the new regime, the new Palestinian regime, the PA, to what extent is it accountable and transparent? The West is the world of the transparency and accountability and all these Western standards. But unfortunately, they forgot to implement these standards when they founded and blindly supported the Palestinian Authority. So for me, part of it is attributed to the fact that you are being supported blindly by people who finally want to clear their conscience by sending you money. So the fact that there is no accountability and there is no transparency by the donors or by the one who are supporting the Palestinian Authority opened the door widely. But the major reason is that the corruption is deeply rooted unfortunately in the Palestinian leadership mentality. This is not a new story. The corruption was there before Oslo. But I prefer to talk Oslo because it was a new era, new period of time where things are supposed to be more settled, more organized. The Arab and the Muslim world, of course, supported generously the PA, but I don't blame them. I cannot say because also this corruption is eating the Arab and the Muslim world. So there's nothing new. But when we're talking about the Western world, we're talking about the world of everything is organized, the world of accountability and transparency.
So it's interesting what you're saying, because part of the Trump plan, which is being talked about, is that Israel would annex certain parts of the West Bank, but there would be a Palestinian state in 70% of the West Bank on the condition of transparency. So it's interesting that this idea of not just throwing money at the Palestinian Authority today seems to be a very real issue.
Yeah, look, regarding also the President Trump plan, he started with something, look, I disagree with him in so many things. But I can agree with something that's very, very important, which is the request, or kind of how he created a sort of conditional fund. Let us call it like this, conditional fund. That I'm not going to support it unless you make some reforming, unless you are becoming more accountable and more transparency, more transparent. Now, this is something not easy, of course, because the corruption is so deeply rooted. You cannot change it in 2 days. It may take decades until you can clean and you can, in a way, reform and upgrade the system so it would be accountable and transparent. But the other part is that, let me put it this way: if we're looking at his plan, we have to people think, or people say, okay, President Trump is going to send you $50 billion. Guys, there are good part and there are part that we have to talk about. Let's say regarding the 70%, I believe that our rejection, let's say since the 1948, we have been rejecting because unfortunately the concept of all or nothing is also deeply rooted in our mind. And the more we think like this, the more we lose. I wholeheartedly believe in this. If we just agreed in 1948 on a state, so many things would have been changed. I believe that if my leaders, the Arab and the Muslim leaders, agreed on what happened on the UN resolution 1948, I don't believe that there will be any refugees. I believe that I would be living somewhere else. But because of this mentality, unfortunately, because of this mentality, all or nothing, we are losing. Then the more we reject and the more we are just thinking this way, the more we are going to lose. But at the same time, I don't believe that uh, Mr. Trump or President Trump mission is to decide for us. I believe that the solution should be between us, between Palestinians and Israelis, and President Trump and the West and the international community should support what we agree on. Now here, if you ask yourself, did the Palestinians agree on this? I mean, President Trump, when he issued this, or when he wrote this plan, did he check with any Palestinian? Did he consult with any Palestinians? It was a kind of dictation. It's just like a sort of, guys, I wrote this plan, I'm going to throw it in you and you have to accept it. So, and the concept, the way that the plan was also thrown to the Palestinian is also humiliating. The Palestinians, they did not participate.
What do you think the response will be?
Sorry?
What do you think the response would be to Israel annexing part of the West Bank?
For me personally, and mark my speech, there will be no response. Because so many things are changing here. There's a dramatic change in the Palestinian community, and people are becoming more realistic and pragmatic rather than emotional. If you go back to President Trump's decision to move the embassy, if you remember that, like the reaction here wasn't more than a few clashes here or there, and that's it. And this shows you, this is an indicator that shows you that the Palestinians are, in a way, that spirit of resisting, just like it used to be, is dying. And so basically, whatever happens here, I believe that the reaction you would barely see any reaction, and it will be probably some few clashes here and there, and the next day people would forget, because that spirit is dying. So this reminds me of an important point that I would like to say with the first lady who asked the answer. What would you want the Israelis to know? What I want you to know is that this is a golden opportunity to prove that you have morals and you have the Jewish morals. And these Jewish morals are going to shape the way that you think about a solution. If you think about it, Israel is the dominant, or let's say it's state number one in the Middle East, economically, politically, and regarding the military. So basically, you are the strongest side in the Middle East. Whatever you decide is going to be implemented no matter what. So this is the time that I believe it is the time that you can prove that you have morals. We have, if we are living in this conflict without any morals, then this is a crisis.
If I can interrupt that, Jonathan Hayward asks, what do the Palestinians think of Iran?
Yeah, so this is also a good question, because we have to understand that dimension of the conflict, which is the Iranian influence. In fact, as you know, Palestine and Palestinians. Yeah, do you hear me, Neil?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Palestinians are Sunnis. So this part of the conflict plays a major role, which is the Sunni-Shiite conflict. The vast majority of the Palestinians, of course, I'm not going to say all, but the vast majority of the Palestinians, they believe that Iran doesn't play any good role here. On the contrary, right after what happened in Syria, they believe in the way that Iran is just playing in the Arab world.
That's in the West Bank, not in Gaza. Hamas is getting aid from you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about West Bank, because even people in Gaza, like when you see the Facebook, when you see the media, when you want to know how people think, you would understand, and you will see how people they hate it. Those people also, they see how they are being ruled by a regime that's supported by Iran, how it made their life hell as well. So the vast majority of the Palestinians, they don't believe that Iran can bring any good to this conflict, and Iran is just playing games on the Arab and the Muslim, and also including the Palestinian blood. And but there's also a percentage of the Palestinian, which is very, very small percentage, that still they have this idea that Iran is supporting the resistance against the Zionist project, against the Israeli Zionist entity. You know, these mottos, the big mottos. But I believe that those people are not honest with themselves. The one who screwed Syria cannot help a Palestinian. The one who screwed Iraq cannot help a Palestinian. The one who screwed Yemen also doesn't have any good intentions to help the Palestinians, to help anybody. So there is something wrong there, and I believe that the vast majority of the Palestinians, they see Iran this way. It's just an enemy to the Palestinians.
Have you seen there was a big news here in Israel about aid which arrived to the Palestinian Authority, and Nigel Lawrence raised the question. He says, "Do you believe the leaders of the Palestinian Authority are acting in the best interest when they turn down plane loads of aid?" I think there was aid coming from the United Arab Emirates, if I'm not mistaken. Aren't they
right? This is also this is a good. Yeah, so this is another part that shows the hypocrisy of the Palestinian Authority. A few months before that, or a few weeks before that, the Palestinian Authority received aid from the Turks. It was the same way it was through Ben Gurion airport, and we didn't hear that anybody rejected this aid. Like the Palestinian Authority got this aid, and everything was okay. But the moment it was sent by the UAE, which is, as you know, UAE, the Arab Emirates, there is the well-known leader whose name is Mohammed Dahlan, and he's a prominent Palestinian figure, and he represents the opposition to Abbas, and the opposition to his corruption, and the opposition to his entire screwed-up regime. So the Palestinian Authority, as part of their hypocrisy, they claimed, or they said to the media, that we rejected it just because we don't want to be the bypass for the Arab normalization with Israel, which is completely wrong, because they have just, as I just said, they have received something like similar by the Turks. So the only reason why they reject it is just like because they see it as a gift from Dahlan, as a gift from Abbas's.
But where is Dahlan now?
He's in the UAE.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So interesting is that's certainly a perspective that many of us here haven't heard about. Perry Bindleglass, I hope I pronounced his name, said, "What would you do if you were in charge?"
I would resign.
You would resign.
I'm kidding. It's really like huge responsibility. Can you imagine when you are being in charge of something, you would start from the zero. Let's say worst case, you would start from the zero. Here, if you are in charge, you would start from the minus 1,000 at least, I think, because you have so many things that you need to address. On one hand, you are still part of the conflict. You are still part of the conflict of which the right wing is in charge, and you don't see anything in the horizon with them. On the other hand, you are part of this regime where the corruption is deeply rooted, that you don't know where to start fixing from. Also, at the same time, even if you want to start fixing this corruption and to clean this corruption, you're going to be like putting yourself at risk. Let me tell you this story. There's one Palestinian figure that I really admire, whose name was Salam Fayyad. He was the Palestinian prime minister right after Hamas took over Gaza, and you know that there was the Palestinian division. So Abbas hired him as the prime minister. I admire this person because the first thing he was trying to do is to fix this corruption and try to solve this. He tried with this person holds a PhD in economics, and he was working for the World Bank. He was in charge of one of their most important financial departments. So basically, the guy is an economist, and he has a very, very important and very amazing economic experience. And he could, I believe, if that guy took an opportunity to move forward, he could have created and created a dramatic positive change regarding the Palestinian economy. But unfortunately, what I'm saying his story, because he was faced by, unfortunately, those corrupts who at some point threatened him that they're going to kill him. I'm talking about Fatah. This guy, the moment he was in charge of the Palestinian Authority, the first thing that he strengthened was a reform in the Palestinian security forces. So many people think that the suicide bombing stopped because of the wall. Yes, we cannot deny this. The wall stopped the bombing, stopped the suicide bombings. But there is also another major reason, which is the reform in the Palestinian Authority the Palestinian Security Forces mentality. So many of the suicide bombings in the Second Intifada were sent by the Palestinian Authority security men. And the first thing that this guy said is that he said violence will not take us anywhere. So the first thing he did was to create a dramatic change in the mentality of the leaders and the officers of the Palestinian security forces.
So
and in a way,
you're saying the Palestinian Authority was behind much of the bombing of the second.
Yeah. Right. It was Hamas in charge of part, and the other part was the Palestinian Authority, which is actually Fatah. And the first dramatic change that he changed is that he changed this mentality, and so the mentality was changed. He completely changed. That security officer who was shooting at Israel is now coordinating with Israel for the sake of stopping any violence from the West Bank. The other thing that
what are the implications of the threat to stop some form of coordination in security arrangements between the Israelis and the Palestinians, or will it carry on? Because if they don't, Hamas would take over.
Let me tell you something. One of the things that you can expect. There are so many things you cannot expect in this conflict, but one of the things that you can expect or you can predict is Abbas's speeches. This is, I think, the 15th time that on the roll that he's threatening that he's going to do this, and he will never do this because he knows very well the moment he's stopping this, then he's done, and the Palestinian Authority is done. And there are chances that Hamas would take over. I'm not saying that this is, I'm sure about it. Or I'm saying that this is something that may happen because Hamas influence on West Bank is not as Hamas influence on Gaza. Right after what happened in 2006 and 2007 with the Palestinian division, right after Hamas took over, so many things changed, including Hamas influence here. Hamas doesn't have that influence on West Bank, the same that influence that it has in Gaza. So I really don't think that Hamas would take over. But I believe that Abbas is not that person who can really take such decision like this and can say that I'm going to stop the security coordination with Israel. He just needed, what I believe is that he just needed to react to the annexation. So he reacted with this threat that he keeps continuing threatening for years now. If you just Google, I wish you know Arabic, if you just wrote like this in Arabic, Google Abbas threatening to stop the security coordination, you'll find it, I think, 20 times in different years. So I don't believe something like that would happen. Yeah, it's just an empty speech with empty words. But if you can just let me a little bit to talk about Salam Fayyad, that guy.
We're a little bit short of time, so I just want to throw in a few more thoughts. Often at universities and elsewhere, people will say that the boycott movement, that people should boycott Israel. What's your thoughts on the BDS movement? Because I know on the ground many Palestinians have actually mixed responses. Not everyone is agreeing with the BDS.
Right. Yeah. Right. Now, BDS movement represent a hope to the Palestinians that they would that it's another form of resistance that would bring Israel on its knees, and etc. etc. Personally, I believe that BDS became just another dictatorship. Just like I'm living under the PA's dictatorship, we're also surrounded and living under the BDS's dictatorship. What do I mean by this? BDS, let's say, they're playing with the fact that the term normalization is vague in so many times. You cannot really define what normalization is. So there you're exploiting this fact in order to harm people's reputation. You know that the Arab and the Palestinian community is an honor-based community, and your honor and your reputation is something very, very important. If you lost your reputation, if you lost your honor, then you're going to pay a heavy price. So this is unfortunately what BDS is doing these days. Anyone who would, let's say, be in a meeting, or just like a few months ago, there was an Arab singer who wants to hold a party in some Arab villages in Israel, and they made him as the person who really brought all the misery to the Arab and the Muslim world, and they exposed him and they bashed him, accusing him of normalization. So this is basically what BDS is doing nowadays. They are trying to be the cult or to be the ghost where everybody who's thinking of having any relation with the Israelis on the personal or on the official level would be afraid. So basically, BDS became just like another source of fear, just like the PA is another source of fear that prevents me of speaking my mind. And they claim that they are like they want to they want to they want to achieve things by boycotting Israel. For me, I personally don't think that if someone, if I'm in your shoes, if I'm saying that someone is calling and sitting against me and calling to boycott me, then I would never talk to him. I would never even give any listening ear to him. This is the basic response. So if you are telling me I'm going to boycott you in order to make you give me my rights, I don't believe that boycotting Israel would let Israel or would make Israelis give rights to the Palestinians or give them any basic right to the Palestinians. So I believe that.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it's the other way that would bring the Palestinian right. It's just the non-boycott. I believe that just like when you asked me how so many things change in your mind, it was a meeting. And based on the BDS standard, the meeting is prohibited. It's a normalization. So I believe that if we understood each other, if we spoke to each other, if you understood the lifestyle, the way that the Palestinians live in West Bank very well, and the way that the current policies of the Israeli right wing affects the Palestinian life, I believe that there is a hope for a change. I don't believe that if I continue saying I'm going to boycott, that this would solve anything. And the other thing is also, if we want to be practical, just like if you go to the well-known story of the Soda Stream and how so many Palestinians lost their jobs because they were working for the Soda Stream, but then the Soda Stream moved their factory inside Israel and they continued with the same people and granted them permits so they can work in that factory. I believe that that BDS is just they just want to create a problem for the Palestinians who are actually looking for just a very simple, dignified life. Right. The vast majority of the Palestinians, their dream nowadays, I just get up every day thinking how can I bring money to my family to put the food on the table. So basically, when you are asking to boycott and such factor like this that hires several hundreds of Palestinians, and then at the end you just want to send them a thank you letter, then you're not helping them to support themselves. You're not helping them to bring the food on the table to their families. So basically, you're just creating problems, financial problem to the Palestinians, economic problem to the Palestinians, and you don't provide any solution to that. So personally, I believe in it.
What you're saying there, I have to ask. We've been looking at this sign behind you, teaching English. I don't know if our viewers can see it, teaching English, and we keep talking about education. How is where you are trying to change things?
Right. Yeah. Change is something very, 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 very complicated, especially if you're living in such society like this that really resists change in so many aspects. If you're asking me why I'm here with you, Neil, it's because I speak English. Unfortunately, we're in both sides. We don't teach each other's language. The PA does not teach Hebrew here, and Israel does not teach Arabic there. So we have a problem here in the means of communication. If we really want to communicate with each other, if we really wanted to hear each other shouting, we have to at least have a language. It happened that in this case, the channel or the means to communicate with you and with so many Israeli friends was through English, unfortunately. I really was hoping that if we at some point could just teach Hebrew here, and if Israel could just go back to Arabic as something mandatory there. But regarding the change, I believe that learning English helped me a lot, and in so many aspects. On one hand, we actually the PA teaches English for about 12 years, since the first grade until the 12th grade. But the quality of education is actually focusing on how can we just form a very good sentence with yes and no and do and does and have and had and that's it. So unfortunately, as part of my experience, students grow up here hating English. And I don't believe anyone would speak English if he hates it. Learning English, as I told you, I have a BA in the applied English language, but But the thing that really made me better in English was the interaction, because I used to work in restaurants and hotels, so I used to interact with English speakers. And I believe that learning this language helped me in one important aspect, first of all, which is how to be objective in your life. Because everything you perceive here, everything you read, everything you, the information that are written in Arabic, in my eyes, they're not objective most of the time. It's one-sided, and if you just want to take them as is, of course, you're going to be another brick in the wall of the same mainstream that is ignorant, that is twisting. So I believe that this language helped me a lot in my life to be more objective, because it opened my mind and opened my eyes to another resources. I can see what's written in Arabic and I see what's written in English, and I can think about it, what makes sense to me.
I understand.
And that, yeah.
Okay, so we have one last question, because like I said, time is not on our side. Is from, this is the most controversial question between Israelis and Palestinians, which is, Ido Midden David says, who do you think has better hummus, Israelis or Palestinians?
Look, I have a different perspective regarding this. Because
a hummus question, that stumped you.
First of all, I don't eat hummus because I have so many intestinal challenges, and I believe if we eat more hummus, we're going to fart more. That's the only thing that I believe in.
I'm allergic to hummus as well, so we've discovered something in common. I'm allergic to hummus as well. So.
I believe there's more like, I don't know, anything that you do it with good intention is going to be tasty, whatever it is. It will. I hate that when we say, oh, okay, the Palestinian hummus, the Israeli hummus, the American hummus, I don't know. I'm not into this, Neil. I disagree with this way of work. You can tell me which hummus is better, Ali's hummus or Neil hummus. I would say let's do it and we will compare. Or you tell me what is better, the Palestinian.
Do you think? I'm really curious. One question I didn't ask you before, and then we really do have to.
Yeah.
You're saying, we talked about the refugees, but one of the issues with the refugee problem is who is a refugee. And there's a lot of controversy here, because if you talked about the refugees, those initial people that left, I mean, and forget Jews who left the Arab world, but if we talk just about the Arab refugees in the Al-Nakba, as it's called, many of the problems which are caused by the refugee problem is the United Nations definition of that, who is a refugee, as in is generational. Would you define yourself as a refugee?
Look, just like what you said, the United Nations contributed a lot, or it's basically the UNRWA, the United Nations for Relief and Working Agency, contributed a lot in strengthening the mentality of being refugees, even though it has been more than 70 years ago since the Nakba, since the Independence War. And I personally, I believe I just identify myself as a person who's looking for a good life. I really don't want that refugee thing to block my life from moving forward, because this is the word refugees, as I told you in the beginning, is connected with the victimhood, and I don't want to be a victim. I refuse to be a victim. All I think about is just how can I move forward in my life and make a better future for myself and for my family, for my brothers, for my sisters, and for those kids whom I'm teaching here, hopefully.
Perhaps
I really don't want them.
There's a common connection between Israelis and Palestinians of making that together. So I want to thank you for joining us. And I know it's not under easy conditions to talk freely and openly critically about the Palestinian society. So thank you very much. I think it was a real insight for us to be able to have this conversation. And I hope we'll be back with some more conversations like this. So thank you again, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Neil. I really appreciate this opportunity. I hope next time we'll have more time, because what you're asking, that your audience are the question that your audience are asking, that really they represent the main issues here. So
absolutely.
I hope that I answered like briefly, because it really needs time. It really, you need to talk thoroughly about things. So I hope that I provided some answers, even though it needs more time and more things to explain and to talk about.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this opportunity, Neil. Thank you so much.